The office door slammed open at 4:17 a.m. 3 board members stormed in, their faces twisted with something between fury and panic. Marcus Thompson didn't flinch. He sat behind his mahogany desk, fingers steepled, watching them with the cold detachment of a man who'd seen this scene play out 1,000 times in his mind. "You slept with her," Gerald Chen said, not a question. His voice cracked on the last word. You actually—" "I don't know what you think you don't," Patricia Owens cut him off, her hand trembling as she threw a manila folder onto his desk. Photographs spilled out, timestamps, hotel receipts, text messages. "She works for Blackstone Capital, Marcus. She's been feeding them everything, every merger, every acquisition, every goddamn board meeting for the last 8 months. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Marcus's jaw tightened, the only visible crack in his armor. "The SEC has questions," James Rodriguez added quietly. "So does your wife's attorney." Marcus Thompson, the self-made billionaire who'd built an empire from dirt and determination, felt the first tremor of what would become an earthquake that would swallow everything he'd ever built. But he didn't know that yet. Not in that moment. In that moment, he still believed he could control it. He was wrong.
If you're already hooked, hit that subscribe button now, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about success. 27 years earlier, Marcus Thompson was nobody, less than nobody. He was the kid whose shoes had holes in them, who wore the same 3 shirts to school in rotation, who ate free lunch and still went home hungry. The kid from Riverside Projects in Detroit, where gunshots were the neighborhood lullaby and dreams went to die. His mother, Claire, worked 3 jobs. She left at 5 a.m. for the diner, came home at 3 p.m. to change uniforms, then headed to the hospital for the overnight cleaning shift. His father had left when Marcus was 4, leaving behind nothing but a foreclosure notice and a taste for whiskey that Marcus swore he'd never inherit. "You're smart, baby," his mother would tell him on the rare nights she was home, her hands cracked and bleeding from industrial cleaner. "You're gonna be something, you hear me? You're gonna be something." Marcus would nod, but inside he felt the weight of impossibility. Smart didn't pay bills. Smart didn't fix the heat when winter came. Smart didn't stop the eviction notices that piled up on the kitchen counter like accusatory fingers pointing at everything they'd never be. He was 14 when he made his first real money. Not drug money. He'd seen where that road led, seen his cousin Darius bleed out on the corner of 5th and Morton over a territory dispute that nobody even remembered the next day. No, Marcus's hustle was different. He fixed things. He'd taught himself how to repair electronics from YouTube videos at the public library. Old computers, broken phones, game consoles. Word spread in the neighborhood. People started showing up at his apartment with their broken lives in digital form, and Marcus would fix them. $5 here, $10 there. By 16, he was making $200 a week.
His mother cried the first time he handed her $300. "Where'd you get this?" she'd asked, fear flashing in her eyes. "Baby, tell me you didn't—" "I fixed Mr. Patterson's laptop," he'd said, "and Mrs. Chen's phone, and I've been saving, Ma. It's clean money, I promise." She'd held him then, her body shaking with sobs that came from somewhere deeper than exhaustion, from hope. The kind of hope that hurts because you've forgotten how to trust it. But hope wasn't enough. A full scholarship to Michigan State was. Marcus studied computer science and business, sleeping 4 hours a night, working 2 part-time jobs, graduating summa cum laude. He had a plan, not a dream. Dreams were for people who could afford them. He had a plan. The plan failed spectacularly. His first startup, a tech consulting firm, went bankrupt in 8 months. The second, a mobile app for small businesses, never got past beta testing. The third attracted investors, took their money, and imploded when his co-founder embezzled $60,000 and disappeared to Costa Rica. Marcus was 26, broke, living in a studio apartment in Chicago that smelled like mildew and broken promises. He was exactly where he'd started, nowhere. Then he met Sarah. She was a nurse at Northwestern Memorial, working the graveyard shift. They met at a 24-hour diner at 2 a.m., both too tired to pretend, too beaten down to perform. She ordered coffee and toast. He ordered water and nothing else because his bank account was $17 in the negative. "Rough night?" she'd asked. "Rough life," he'd answered. She'd smiled, a real smile, and slid half her toast across the table. Then we match. 6 months later, they were married at City Hall with 2 witnesses they'd pulled from the waiting room. No reception, no honeymoon, just 2 people who'd seen the bottom and decided they'd rather climb together. Sarah believed in him, not in the polite, obligatory way. She believed the way you believe in gravity, completely, without question. "You're going to make it," she'd whisper on the nights when the bills piled higher than hope. "I know you are." "How?" he'd ask. "How do you know?" "Because you don't know how to quit. It's not in you, Marcus. You're too stubborn to fail." She was right, but stubborn and successful aren't the same thing. The breakthrough came from desperation. Marcus had one last idea, a supply chain optimization software for small agricultural businesses. It wasn't sexy, it wasn't revolutionary, it was just useful. He built it in 3 months, subsisting on ramen and Sarah's encouragement. The first farmer who tried it saved $40,000 in the first quarter. Word spread, not like wildfire, like roots, slow, deep, unstoppable. Within 2 years, AgriOptima had 12,000 clients across 43 states. Within 5 years, Marcus had sold the company to a Silicon Valley giant for $78 million. He was 33 years old. The call started immediately.
At first, Marcus thought it was beautiful. Vindication, proof that he'd made it. Every ring was a small victory against everyone who'd ever doubted him, every teacher who suggested trade school instead of college, every investor who'd laughed him out of their office. But the calls kept multiplying. Classmates he hadn't spoken to in 15 years suddenly remembered they'd been best friends. Distant cousins he'd never met materialized with urgent financial crises. His phone rang at 4 a.m., at 11 p.m., during dinner, during sex, during the rare moments he tried to sleep. "Marcus, hey, it's Derek from sophomore geometry. Remember when I let you copy my homework that one time? Listen, I've got this opportunity." "Marcus, this is your Uncle Ray's brother-in-law's nephew. Family, right? So I'm in a bit of a situation." "Mr. Thompson, this is Senator Michael's office. The senator would love to discuss potential investment opportunities." He hired an assistant, then 2, then a whole team whose only job was to filter the noise. But the noise was everywhere. It was deafening. Sarah watched it happen, watched him transform from the man who'd shared toast at a diner into someone she barely recognized, someone who checked his phone during their anniversary dinner, someone who took calls during her ultrasound. "Marcus," she'd said softly when he'd stepped out of the examination room, again, to take a call from a tech CEO in Singapore, Did you hear what the doctor said?" "About what?" He was distracted, already responding to an email. "Twins," she whispered. "We're having twins." He'd looked up then, smiled, kissed her forehead. "That's amazing, baby. I'm so happy." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it. "I have to take this. 5 minutes, I promise." It wasn't 5 minutes. It never was. This is where everything starts to unravel. Subscribe now. You won't want to miss what comes next. By year 8, Marcus Thompson's empire had expanded beyond agriculture. He'd invested in banking startups, renewable energy, real estate, artificial intelligence. His net worth crossed $2 billion. Forbes called him the Midas touch. Bloomberg featured him on their cover, the man who never sleeps. They were right about the sleep part. He averaged 3 hours a night. The rest was calls, meetings, deals, more calls. 2,000 calls a day. His team had calculated it. 2,000 separate human beings wanting something from Marcus Thompson every single day. He loved it. God help him, he loved it. Every call was proof that he'd escaped Riverside projects, proof that he mattered, proof that the universe was listening when Marcus Thompson spoke. But he wasn't listening to anything, not really. Not to his mother when she called to say she missed him, not to his friends when they suggested he slow down, and certainly not to Sarah. Sarah, who was 7 months pregnant with twins. Sarah, who decorated a nursery by herself. Sarah, who'd gone to every prenatal appointment alone. Sarah, who cried herself to sleep in a bed that cost more than her parents' house, next to a man who was there but not present. The night it happened, Marcus was in his home office, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. He was on the phone with the Prime Minister of Singapore, discussing a $100 million infrastructure deal. His other phone vibrated. Sarah. He declined the call. It vibrated again. He declined again. The third time, he answered with barely concealed irritation. "Sarah, I'm in the middle of—" "The babies," she gasped. Her voice was tight with pain. "Marcus, something's wrong. The contractions, they're too early. I'm bleeding. I need you to—" "Call 911, he said quickly. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I just need to—" "Marcus," her voice broke. "Please, I'm scared." "20 minutes, baby. I promise." He hung up, returned to the Prime Minister. "I apologize for the interruption. As I was saying, the call lasted 43 minutes. By the time Marcus arrived at Northwestern Memorial, Emma and Ethan Thompson had been born, 6 weeks premature, 1 pound, 4 ounces each, their tiny bodies covered in tubes and wires, fighting for every breath in the NICU. Sarah was in her room, staring at the ceiling with empty eyes. The nurse had just finished checking her vitals. "Sarah?" Marcus breathed, rushing to her bedside. "I'm so sorry. The call, it was important, and I thought—" "Important," she repeated. Her voice was flat, dead. "More important than me. More important than our children. That's not fair. You know what this deal means for—" "I was here before the calls, Marcus." She turned to look at him finally, and her eyes held something worse than anger. They held goodbye. "I was here when you had nothing, when we ate toast at 2 a.m. and pretended it was enough, when we got married at City Hall because we couldn't afford anything else. I was here." "You're still here," he said desperately. "We're still—" "No," she cracked. "No, we're not. You're somewhere else. You've been somewhere else for years. I've just been too stupid to see it." Marcus felt panic claw at his throat. "I'll change. I'll cut back on work. "I don't believe you," she whispered. I don't even recognize you anymore." 2 weeks later, while Emma and Ethan still fought for life in plastic boxes, Marcus made the worst decision of his life. Her name was Rebecca Lawson. She was a strategic consultant for Blackstone Capital, brilliant and beautiful and dangerous in ways Marcus was too arrogant to see. They met at a conference in New York. She laughed at his jokes, listened to his stories, made him feel seen in a way Sarah no longer did. It started with late-night strategy sessions, then dinners, then hotel rooms in cities where nobody knew his name. Rebecca asked questions, thoughtful questions, about his business strategies, his upcoming deals, his competitors' weaknesses. Marcus, drunk on attention and validation, answered them all. He didn't know she was recording every word. The exposure came 8 months later, not from Rebecca. She'd disappeared 2 weeks after their last meeting, along with detailed files on every major deal in Marcus's portfolio. No, the exposure came from Gerald Chen, the board member who'd always been more loyal to Sarah than to him. Which brought Marcus back to this moment, 4:17 a.m., 3 board members in his office, photographs scattered across his desk like accusations, and the first hairline fractures appearing in the empire he'd built from nothing. "You need to resign," Patricia said. Her voice was gentle, almost kind, which somehow made it worse.
Effective immediately. We'll announce it as a sabotage. Family health issues. The twins, that part's even true.
You can't, Marcus started. We already voted, James said quietly. 7-1. You're out, Marcus. We'll handle the SEC investigation. We'll manage the press. But you're done. Sarah? The name came out as a question, though Marcus already knew the answer. Filed this morning, Gerald confirmed. She's taking the twins to her sisters in Portland. The divorce papers cite adultery and abandonment. She's asking for full custody. The room tilted. Marcus gripped the edge of his desk. I need to talk to her. Explain. She doesn't want to hear from you, Patricia said. She made that very clear. They left him there, alone in his office with his silent phone and the wreckage of everything he thought he was building. The news broke at 6 a.m. By noon, Marcus Thompson's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. By evening, the calls started stopping. Not all at once. That would have been merciful. They faded like a sunset, so gradually you didn't notice until suddenly it was dark. 2,000 calls became 1,000, then 500, then 100, then silence. The fall is devastating, but the silence that follows is even worse. Don't miss what happens when Marcus hits rock bottom. Subscribe now. Marcus sat in his penthouse, the one he'd bought to celebrate his first billion, the one with views that made visitors gasp, and stared at his phone. It was 4 a.m., the hour when he used to be overwhelmed with calls. Now, nothing. The screen was dark, silent, accusing. He checked it compulsively, convinced he'd missed something, a vibration, a notification, anything. But the phone was dead in ways that had nothing to do with battery life. Sometimes he swore he felt it buzz. He'd grab it, heart racing, only to find the screen empty. The phantom ringing was worse than the real thing had ever been. It meant the noise was inside him now, an echo of validation he'd never actually had. The money was still there, most of it anyway. Frozen assets, pending investigations, lawyers' fees, these things added up, but Marcus Thompson was still worth more than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. But money, he learned, couldn't buy back silence, couldn't fill the space left by voices that never actually cared about him, only what he could do for them. His mother called once, just once. "Baby," she said, her voice tired and sad. "I saw the news. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Ma." The lie tasted like ash. "No, you're not. But that's okay. You don't have to be okay right now." She paused. "I'm proud of you, you know? Not for the money. I was proud before the money. I'm still proud." "How?" The word cracked. "How can you be proud? I destroyed everything. My marriage, my company, You're still breathing," she said simply. "That means you can still choose what comes next. Money doesn't make those choices, baby. You do." She was the only one who called that week. The week after that, nobody called at all. Marcus started making a list, not of business contacts or investment opportunities, a different kind of list. Names of people who'd mattered before the money, people he'd forgotten, people he'd hurt. The list was shorter than he'd expected, and longer than he deserved. He started with Jerome Parks, his college roommate, the guy who'd let Marcus crash on his couch for 6 months after the third startup failed, the guy Marcus had ghosted the moment Agri-Optimus sold. Jerome answered on the 4th ring. "Jerome?" "Hey," Marcus's throat felt tight. I know it's been a while. I just wanted to—" "3 years," Jerome said. Not angry, just factual. 3 years you disappeared, man. Didn't return calls, didn't answer emails. I thought maybe I did something. You didn't. You were perfect. I was the one who... I got lost in the noise, in the validation, and I forgot who actually gave a damn about me before I had anything to give back. Silence on the other end. Then, "You okay, Marcus? I saw the news about the company, about Sarah." "No,"
Marcus admitted. "I'm not okay. I'm the opposite of okay, but I'm trying to fix it. Not the company, not the reputation, just the person. I'm trying to fix the person." "Good," Jerome said softly, "because the person was always the part worth knowing." They talked for an hour, not about business, not about money, about movies and books and the Cubs' terrible season and Jerome's daughter who's starting kindergarten, and whether deep dish pizza was actually pizza or just a casserole with delusions of grandeur. It was the first real conversation Marcus had had in years. Next was Maria Gonzalez, his mother's neighbor from the projects, the woman who'd babysat him for free when Claire was working triple shifts. The woman's Christmas card Marcus had returned unopened 3 years ago because he was too busy. "Mijo," she said when she answered, and Marcus nearly broke down at the warmth in that single word. "I heard what happened, about the company, about your divorce, and I just wanted you to know that I remember you, not the billionaire version, the 2 a.m. version, the guy who always tipped 20% even when you only ordered water." His throat closed. "Why are you calling me?"
"Because I saw you on the news, and everyone was talking about what you lost, but nobody was talking about who you were. And I thought maybe you needed to hear that someone remembers, that you were kind when you didn't have to be, that you mattered before the money, that you still matter now." "I don't," Marcus's voice broke. "I don't deserve that." "Maybe not," Angela said gently. "But I'm not calling because you deserve it. I'm calling because sometimes people need to hear the truth more than they need to hear what they deserve." She hung up before he could respond. Marcus sat in the dark, phone clutched in his hand, and cried for the first time since the hospital. Not for what he'd lost, for what he'd finally understood. 2,000 calls weren't relationships. 2,000 calls were transactions, performance metrics, proof of influence that evaporated the moment the influence did. But this call, this one call from a stranger who gained nothing from reaching out, this was real. 6 months after his empire crumbled, Marcus Thompson stood outside a small storefront in Detroit's Corktown neighborhood. The sign above the door read, "Tech Bridge, free computer repair and digital literacy." Inside, he taught teenagers how to code, how to fix broken laptops, how to build something from nothing. He didn't tell them who he was, didn't mention the billions or the empire or the fall. He was just Marcus, the guy who knew his way around a circuit board and believed in second chances. His phone barely rang anymore, maybe 10 calls a week. His mother, Jerome, Mrs. Gonzalez, a few others who'd earned their place in his life by being there when presence was all they could offer. Marcus had learned to love the silence, to see it not as absence, but as space. Space to think, to feel, to be. Sarah hadn't forgiven him. She'd made that clear through her lawyers. But she'd agreed to supervised visits with Emma and Ethan, now 18 months old and perfect in ways that made Marcus's chest ache. They should know their father, she'd written in an email. Not you, not Marcus, their father. Clinical, distant, but it was something. He was trying, slowly, imperfectly, but trying. One Thursday evening, as Marcus was locking up Tech Bridge, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, then curiosity won. "Hello? Marcus Thompson?" A man's voice, smooth, professional, dangerous. "Who's asking?" "My name is Richard Castellanos. I represent a consortium of investors who've been watching your situation. We're impressed with how you've handled your fall from grace, the humility, the community work, the image rehabilitation. I'm not interested in," Marcus started. "We want to give you your empire back. Full board control, majority stake, $2.5 billion in capital to rebuild. All of it." Marcus's heart stopped. "What's the catch?" "Simple. We need you to testify against Gerald Chen. He's blocking a merger we've been working on for 2 years. His reputation is spotless, but yours is already destroyed. Your testimony would destroy his too. It's a small thing. One conversation with the SEC, and everything you lost, it's yours again." Marcus thought about Gerald, the board member who'd been loyal to Sarah, yes, but also the man who'd given Marcus his first real investment, who'd stood as godfather to Emma and Ethan. Gerald was one of the 20, one of the people who'd stayed. "No," Marcus said quietly. "Excuse me?" I said no. "Thank you for the offer, but I'm not interested." "Mr. Thompson, I don't think you understand what we're—" "I understand perfectly. You want me to betray someone who stood by my wife when I abandoned her, someone who helped me build everything I eventually destroyed. You're asking me to trade my character for influence, and I did that once. It cost me everything that actually mattered. So no, my answer is no." He hung up before Richard could respond. His hands were shaking. His phone felt heavy. For a moment, just a moment, he regretted it. 2.5 billion, his empire back, vindication. Then his phone rang again. Different number this time. He recognized it immediately. Gerald Chen. "Hey," Gerald said when he answered. His voice was tired but warm. "I just got a weird call from Richard Castellanos. He seemed pretty angry, said something about you being uncooperative. Yeah, he made me an offer. I turned him down." "Why?" "Because I'm tired of choosing wrong," Marcus said simply. "I'm tired of mistaking noise for connection, influence for relationship. I'm tired of being the person who had 2,000 calls a day and nobody who actually gave a damn." Silence. Then Gerald laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. "You know what? I think that's the first completely honest thing you've said to me in 5 years. "Probably," Marcus admitted. "Listen, I'm not calling to thank you for turning down Castellanos. I'm calling because Sarah mentioned you've been showing up to your supervised visits, on time, sober, present. The social worker said Emma keeps asking about Dada, Ethan too." Marcus's throat tightened. "I'm trying." "I know, and Sarah knows. She's not ready to forgive you. Maybe she never will be. But she asked me to tell you something. She's willing to try supervised dinners, the 4 of you, once a month, if you want." "I want," Marcus said immediately. "God, yes, I want that." "Good, because those kids deserve a father who shows up, not a billionaire, not an empire builder, just a father. Thank you for believing I could be that. I don't believe it, honestly. Not yet, but I believe you're trying, and that's enough for now." After he hung up, Marcus sat in his car in the Tech Bridge parking lot and stared at his phone. The screen was dark and quiet. No phantom vibrations, no ghost calls, just silence. Beautiful, terrifying, honest silence. He thought about the 2,000 calls, all those voices clamoring for his attention, his money, his influence, all those people who disappeared the moment he had nothing left to give. And then he thought about the 20, the people who stayed, the people who called to check on him, not to ask for something, the people who remembered Marcus Thompson before he became a headline. Maybe wealth had never been about how many people called. Maybe it was always about who still called when there was nothing to gain. Who called just to say, "I remember you, I see you, you matter." His phone buzzed. One last call for the night. Unknown number. He almost sent it to voicemail. Then he answered. "Hello? Mr. Thompson?" A young voice, nervous. "This is Jamal from Tech Bridge. I know it's late, but I just wanted to say thank you for today, for teaching me how to code that animation. My teacher said it was good, really good, and I wanted you to know that it mattered, that you mattered." Marcus closed his eyes, smiled. "Thank you for calling, Jamal. I needed to hear that tonight." "Yeah?" The boy sounded pleased. "Cool. Anyway, see you Monday, Mr. T." "See you Monday." Marcus sat there for a long time after the call ended, his phone resting in his palm. He thought about the long road ahead, the supervised dinners with Sarah and the twins, the slow rebuild of trust with the 20 people who stayed, the daily choice to be present instead of powerful. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, moments of doubt, nights when the phantom ringing came back and he remembered what it felt like to be validated by thousands of voices that meant nothing. But he had a choice now. Every single day, he had a choice. And maybe that's the real wealth, not the billions, not the empire, not the 2,000 calls. The choice to be someone worth calling,
Not for what he could give, but for who he was. But the story isn't over, not even close. What Marcus does with this second chance will either restore everything he lost or cost him the last 20 people he has left. In Part 2, you'll discover the choice that changes everything. A choice between redemption and vengeance, between character and conquest, between the man he was and the man he's trying to become. Subscribe now so you don't miss it, because what comes next will make you question everything you thought you knew about success, failure, and what it truly means to build a life worth living. The phone is about to ring again, and this time, the price of answering isn't money, it's his soul.